There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome to a very quick and dirty Friday Reads. It'll probably be about average length because I have two guests, one of whom is a mystery guest, but I am so pressed for time. I found out late last night that I have company coming for the entire weekend, and in order to get ready for their arrival and to finish up reading a book that I need to read before my interview for a podcast Saturday night, and to kind of recover from my shingles vaccination, the first of 2 doses that I got yesterday. I woke up feeling kind of worse than I did when I went to bed last night, just kind of processing the vaccination. So I just don't have time to really. I was going to skip it altogether, but I've got guests for you. So that's going to be pretty much it. But the first one is not a mystery guest and will no longer be a mystery guest on my channel because I've thought of a much more suitable way to keep her book chat going, and that's Sharon Butala. I'm going to show you in a minute the tail end of the book chat we did in December. So stay tuned for that. And then from now on, I'm just going to spin my book chats with Sharon Butala off into their own kind of series or occasional series. So I'm excited about that. And I don't know if she's excited about it, but she is interested in continuing in that way. And oh my God, 2 pieces of big Sharon Butala news that I have authorized to reveal to you all. The first one is just a few days ago, she won the Glengarry Book Award. I'd never heard of it, but it's a Western Canadian Book Award established in 2021, and it's a $20,000 Canadian prize for a first edition of a novel or work of short fiction, and she won it for her most recent novel, Leaving Wisdom. My very first chat with her was about this novel. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, but congratulations. Holy smokes, that's just wonderful. I couldn't be more thrilled. And if that weren't enough, she's also decided, and these 2 things are completely unrelated. The next decision I'm going to announce to you was made prior to that. She's moving to Saskatoon, maybe in June, but sometime later this year. How excited am I about that? So, wow. When I have her back on, she'll maybe tell you more about the whys and wherefores of all that. But Calgary's loss is Saskatoon's gain, and certainly Sean the Book Maniac's gain. So, without further ado, here is the tail end. So there's no kind of introduction. It's going to start awkwardly and end awkwardly. It's just the chat that I didn't have room for on my Friday Reads at the end of December, and it's good stuff. So here it is.
I do have 2 books by one more author, a Japanese American writer named Katie Kitamura.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember where I first heard of her, just recently. I just thought I'd take a look, and she's doing extremely well. At some point she'll be a top-notch writer, I would say. And the first novel I read was A Separation, and that's the title of that Iranian foreign film that did so wonderfully a few years ago. But
Yep.
it bears no resemblance, we could say. The main character, who is never named in either of these 2 novels, she and her husband have separated, but for certain reasons have agreed to keep this separation secret. He has headed off for a month on a remote Greek island to do his research on, I think, mourning rituals in various societies. And she has already moved in with another man, but she hasn't been able to tell the new man or the husband that she wants a divorce because she hasn't been sure that she does. And near the opening of the novel, she says, I need a divorce. I am going to divorce him because the new man is pressuring her. And he's, by the way, about the only normal human being in the novel. So
Okay.
she decides she has to tell him in person. There are certain things in the construction of the novel that I'm a bit dubious about, and that's one of them. She's going to tell him in person. So she gets on a plane and flies to Greece, goes to his hotel, and his things are all there, but he isn't. And there's no secret whatsoever that he is a very good looking man. There seems to be some wealth, and he is a womanizer. He is incapable of not pursuing any woman who in any way appeals to him. And that's part of the reason for the troubles. So when she gets there, he's not there, and she waits around for him and waits around and waits around and waits around. And it seems like forever in the novel, but in the end, I think it's only about 3 days. Now, here's the clincher. Should I tell you this or not? He finally is found. I'll say that. So then she has to phone his parents, who are frantically worried about this disappearance. And they fly instantly. And they're really quite fascinating characters and quite difficult people, especially the mother. Wealthy, hugely cultivated, very demanding, as such people tend to be. The world belongs to me, not you. And so it gives her plenty of opportunity to do what she does best, what she seems to love most, which is these little interactions between people, or little scenes she's watching between people that she goes into great detail over. And it seems to be her favorite thing to do, and she's quite good at it. So I'm going to move to the second book, published in, I hope I wrote it down. No, I did not. But
Is it
maybe here.
Intimacies?
Intimacies. Yes. Which
2021. I have it here.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. And which did even better than A Separation. And it is a better book. But there's still these things in it that I just kind of don't buy. You have to go with the writer and say, oh, okay, I can't see that happening, but she says it does. So, and it's really essentially, it's the same character telling the same story. Have you
Oh,
ever heard the saying that every novelist has only one novel in them and they just keep writing it over and over again?
yes,
And
yes.
I think this is a perfect example. The same main character, who is nameless, who you figure out is beautiful and highly educated, and both these women are translators. The unique thing about the second novel is that she's a translator at The Hague, and she's translating for an African despot who has murdered people, and done horrible, horrible things that are never mentioned, just how horrible they are. And she becomes his translator. It's French English in this case, but then there are a number of other languages so a great deal of the novel is about the difficulties of the work of interpretation and translation in a situation like that, which I found quite fascinating. At one point, she doesn't know how to translate what's going on down on the floor below her, which she has to translate because what she's hearing is so terrible, she can't find a voice for it, a nuance, a tone. And she chooses at that point to be ironic, puts an ironic tone into her translation. And as she's looking down at this African despot who's been in prison for 5 years, and they finally gathered the evidence for the trial, when he hears the tone in her voice, he suddenly looks up and fixes his eyes on hers. And she understands she's been chastised. The irony has to go. And
Oh,
how does she say this stuff? Oh my gosh, it's quite fascinating. However, she then has to go into several times, or at least twice, into a small meeting room to sit right beside this evil man and talk into his ear about what's being said across the table by UN officials and judges and so on. There were like maybe 5 people in the room. And that's how close she is to this monster. And he takes a liking to her. So she spends a lot of time. What she's really talking about is, how is this man so evil when he's so charming, when he has such charisma, blah, blah, blah. And that's pretty interesting too. Although I was thinking today, I was walking along the reservoir through the trees with a friend, and I started to think, no, wait a minute. I read Explaining Hitler by Ron Rosenzweig, and I thought it was a marvelous book. And in the end, he can't explain Hitler. He just provides and tries to deconstruct the standard. Oh, he was crazy. Oh, he had a bad childhood. He was possessed by the devil, kind of thing. And I suddenly thought, this is not original stuff. It's beautifully written. cleverly written, and it's interesting, but in the end, what we find out is we do not know. And I already knew that. So, that's kind of a set piece within the novel. The rest of it is about when she arrives in The Hague, she promptly meets this wonderful man who's a very beautiful man, tremendously well educated and successful and rich, and he falls for her instantly. And then he says, I have to go to Spain, where my wife has gone with our children, to sort out what we're going to do, because the marriage is or isn't over. And will you stay in my apartment while I'm gone? I will be back in a week. In fact, it's over a month, and the wife shows up at one point,
Oh,
and they have this discussion in what is essentially the wife's kitchen in this apartment she's staying in. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And during this month, when the husband boyfriend is away, he doesn't get in touch with her. He doesn't explain a thing to her. He never calls. And she finally, after the wife shows up, decides she's been had and goes back to her own apartment, which I would have done 2 weeks earlier, personally. As speaking as a literary critic.
that sounds like a little bit of drama in the novel.
Yeah, it is a better put together novel. It's more interesting. And the African dictator thing is really quite fascinating. So, if I were to go on and tell you more, I actually think that the ending is contrived. And speaking as someone who's published 9 novels now out of my 22 books, I know the pressure on, especially a writer who's up and coming as she is, to from the publisher, from the agent, from the editor, to provide the publisher with a book that will please audiences. And I feel that that's what happened at the end of this book, but maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But I would say it's a much better book than A Separation. And I think whatever comes next, I will be watching for it.
What I've heard about that novel, Intimacies, is that, and it's kind of ironic given the title of the novel, is that it's a bit cold.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so that, which doesn't excite me, but I still want to give it a try someday.
I think it's worth it. I'm not at all sorry that I discovered her, and I found it interesting, but Jhumpa Lahiri does it way better. And but that's experience and so on. And also in Jhumpa Lahiri, even though she is a minimalist, as I said, she will tell you, I was so upset I had to leave the table, whereas maybe it just doesn't ring true when Katie Kitamura does that. She could be a great writer someday, I would say.
The translation part of it is fascinating to me, and it makes me think of a novel by the Spanish novelist Javier Marías, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Hmm.
Have you read anything by him
If I have, I don't recall right now,
by
no.
name? I think his most one of his more well-known ones is from 1992. Translation is 1995. A Heart So White, and I read
No,
it
yeah.
shortly after it came out, and I didn't like it very much, but there was one scene that has always stuck with me, and it's about two translators. One is Maggie Thatcher's translator, and the other one is whatever the Spanish Prime Minister's translator. And so they're having a meeting. So I guess that's not translation, is that's interpretation. But the two world leaders are having a meeting, and the
Uh-huh.
translators start fooling around with the translation in order to flirt with each other, unbeknownst to
Oh my
Maggie Thatcher.
gosh.
Yeah, yeah, and it was just a crazy scene that I loved. I didn't like much else about the book, but every time I hear about translation as a theme in fiction, my mind flashes back to that scene.
I have to find that book. I'd like to read it. And this past weekend with one of my house guests, we sat down and we watched, I think it's called The Interpreter with Nicole Kidman. We had seen the film before, but we just wanted to see it again because it'd been a long time. She's an interpreter at the UN in New York, And
New
she
York.
speaks an African tribal language that only 4 people in the world speak. So that's what gets her a job there and brings her into African problems, you know. And so it was interesting to having just read this book and the discussions about interpretation, and there's Nicole Kidman whispering in someone's ear, you know, in Ku, which I think is an invented language about from an invented country.
And here is this week's Mystery Guest, which is also very exciting, and it was recorded in December in this very room. This week's mystery guest is the Nigerian-Canadian novelist who lives in Saskatoon, Michael Afenfia. Michael, hello.
Hi.
It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Sean.
We have had a long chat about Michael's recent novel, Leave My Bones in Saskatoon. That will be forthcoming on my channel, so stay tuned for that. But here's Michael to talk about what he might be working on writing-wise and what he's been reading recently. So, I was very excited a little while ago to find out that you have a children's book coming out. Tell us about that.
The children's book, it's called The Twins Who Saved Izombele. Strange title.
Interesting.
Interesting title. Since moving to Canada, I've been really fascinated in finding out their local languages. And when I say local languages, I don't want to restrict myself to, just the First Nations, and languages spoken by the Indigenous peoples. But just the fact that anywhere you go, you're going to encounter something that's not just English or French. So if you're in a cab, for instance, in an Uber, and the Uber driver starts to have a conversation on the phone with someone else, they're speaking
any number of...
Yeah, it could be any, So I thought I was going to, in addition to thinking I was going to lose my, writing, I thought I would miss out on cultural experiences like that. And so it was a pleasant surprise when I came here and I saw how very cultural Canada can be, and all of the conversations around preservation of those cultures. And language, of course, is one of those things. Yeah, so in this children's book set in a Nigerian village, this community had just lost their language. So they wake up one morning and the language is gone. And so they had to find their language and put it back together. And so the book documents the experience of some kids who went on this wild adventure to find their language and bring the language back to the village.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. When is it coming out?
Sometime in 2024.
Great. Is it the same publisher or you?
Yeah, the same
lovely.
publisher. Yes, the same publisher. So I'm working on that.
Great.
Too.
And I know a lot of writers don't like to say too much about works in progress, but do you want to say any more about anything else you're working on?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting time for me because I just wrapped up the children's book, working on a collection of short stories, and for that collection of short stories, I have funding from Sask Arts, the Saskatchewan Arts Board. Really excited about that opportunity. And then I'm working on a full-length novel as well that I'm really, really excited about because it's just crazy, like something I've never done before.
Oh, wow.
Like just some crazy subject matter that I never even saw myself like even doing that. I think with Leave My Bones in Saskatoon, which is like my most recent book, and the other one, Rain Can Never Know. With Leave My Bones and Rain Can Never Know, I kind of went in heavy, but I'm having so much fun writing this new book because it's kind of lighter.
Okay.
Yeah, this sort of thing that come more natural to me. So I'm really excited about it. And even more excited because that book, I would say, took me about, I'm still working on it, but like I'm pretty much done. and I kind of did that in 2 months. So that's like a record for me.
Holy smokes. Yeah, you were saying when we were having coffee at the cafe earlier, how many books have you had come out in the last 4 or 5 years, or have written and or have had published?
Yeah, so in the last 4 years, um, I have written and published two full-length novels. I have completed a manuscript for a children's book. Pretty much done with my collection of short stories, but not yet published. And then another full-length novel. So 5 books actually.
Being that prolific, spending that much time writing, do you have any time for reading in your life, Michael?
Yeah, that's something I haven't been as committed to as I would love to, because I've really devoted a lot of time to writing my own book. Um, but I think it's important that, especially moving to Canada, I thought it was important that I familiarize myself with what Canadian literature is. So luckily, last Christmas, I was on the jury of a book award.
Oh,
Yeah, for one of the provinces in Canada, and so I had all these books shipped to me, and I kind of just immersed myself in Canadian literature.
do you not want to say what prize it was? Is it you'd like to keep that
Um,
private, or?
Well, yeah, maybe,
that's fine.
yeah,
We'll
maybe I
just-
can't be, yeah, but I mean, one of the big prizes in one of the provinces,
Oh wow.
for fiction, published in 2022.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I got to read like really great books. But I mean, I kind of got really immersed and introduced to Canadian literature reading those books, and most recently, apart from my writing, of course, like I've had like full time, like very high intensity jobs, um, that keep me up at night, just reading reports and doing reports and preparing for board meetings and things like that. But I do find time, every now and then, if I get recommended a good book or author I would like to read. And the most recent book was by Michelle Good.
Aha.
Yeah, and it's not fiction. It's like her new book, which is a collection of essays called Truth Telling. I think 7 conversations on Indigenous history or something like that. And that's the last book I read, and I totally enjoyed reading that book. It was like an expose on things I needed to know,
Yeah.
and just what are the first things, like, even in life and as a nation, as a people, as a country, we have to start from somewhere, and those building blocks have to be like confronting our past,
Absolutely.
who you are, and then building up on it. So that's something I read like recently, and it kind of really inspired me.
Yes.
Reminded me about the importance of storytelling.
Incredible. Michelle Good is one of Canada's most well-known Indigenous writers, and her novel Five Little Indians won the Governor General's Award a few years ago, and her latest book, Truth Telling, is a series of essays.
Yeah, 7 essays
About the Indigenous experience and about reconciliation in Canada, and she is a truth teller extraordinaire.
Yeah.
The last time I saw you was at Word on the Street, a literary.
Yeah, that was why I bought the book.
That's right. And she was one of the keynote speakers, and she's just amazing.
Yeah, she
So
is.
my mom has read that book and said it was incredible. I'm looking forward to reading it. So that's great. Any other books you'd like to tell us about?
Well, this I haven't read,
yeah.
but I think it's gonna be fascinating. So a while back, I used to be on radio. I hosted a radio show on CFCR.
You
called-
did?
Yeah.
You've only been here a few years. You've done all these interesting things.
Yeah, sometimes feels like I've lived a million lives since being here. Yeah, I used to be on this. I used to host this radio show called The Global Voice, and one day the producer Mackenzie informs me that I'll be having a guest, Ukrainian Canadian grandmother, who, when the war started in Ukraine, started from her garage, just getting stuff from the community and giving them to Ukrainians who are arriving here, because I mean they're fleeing from war, and some of them just barely got here with the clothes on their back. So just clothes and groceries and toys for the kids and all sorts of things. So we had that interview, and I totally forgot about the interview. Of course, moved on with my life. And then a few weeks ago, I get a phone call from her, from this number. I don't know the number, but I picked the phone and I was like, "Hey, Michael, it's me. It's Nettie. It's Nettie." I'm like, "Yeah, Nettie." And she says, "You probably don't remember me, but I was in your studio and we did this, interview together. And after the interview, you told me to write a book." And I'm like, she was like, "How was I going to do that anyway?" So that conversation happened, and then she says, "Oh, guess what? I wrote the book," and we're having a book launch at the Canadian Ukrainian Museum on Spadina. I'd like you to be there. So of course I show up, and she was really excited, and it's the Barber's Closet. That's the title of the book.
Oh, I've heard it.
Yeah, yeah. So Barber's Closet is also the name of the store. The store she opened, and still hands out stuff. Still does all that charity, handing out stuff to people for free. I'm doing such an amazing job in the community. So anyway, Nettie wrote a book, Ukrainian Canadian grandmother, and I had to make a post on social media about it because I was really excited for her, for the book. And for me, it was touching because, like I said in the post, or wrote in the post, like moving to Canada, of course, I had dreams of doing things like accomplishing a lot of things when I get here or when I got here. But never, ever, ever in a million years did I think I would inspire a Ukrainian Canadian grandmother to write a book.
That is just the loveliest
Yeah.
anecdote. I love that.
So I'm excited to read the book and see all the wonderful stories Nettie has in that book.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you have a favorite writer or a favorite novel?
I do. I do. Like there are three writers that I absolutely love, and I think like if it wasn't for their influence, I would never ever 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 have even considered writing. One of them, and in no order of importance in terms of influence on me, but there's Buchi Emecheta. Buchi Emecheta is a Nigerian author who lived in the UK for so many years, and wrote so many wonderful books. One book she has, The Joys of Motherhood, really really inspired my decision to write my own book.
Oh, wow.
I was really like touched by her writing style, and just like the book really inspired me as a young person to write. And of course there's Chinua Achebe. I was sharing with somebody recently how, because of something I'm working on currently, I had to go back to read Chinua Achebe's novel Things Fall Apart, and I haven't read Things Fall Apart since I left high school. So it'd be my first time in so many years reading Things Fall Apart or any Achebe's books. And I picked up Things Fall Apart a few years ago. I'm like, oh, no wonder this is such a great book. It's such a simple read.
Powerful book.
It's such a simple, small but powerful book. And I've always been intrigued by like that simplicity. Like anybody can pick up that book and it will absolutely mean something to them. Yeah, another writer that has really influenced me is James Michener. But he does this like fantastic historical novels. He's fantastic with historical novels. And I thought that was the kind of writer I was going to be because my first book, When the Mold Caught Fire, is actually historical. But I think life happened because if I had my way, I just want to travel all over the world and write books about the places I've been to or I'm visiting. But of course, I have to work and pay my bills, so I can only write about Saskatoon and Yenagoa.
Lucky for us. Oh yeah, no, he's very famous, very popular.
Yeah.
Is he still alive?
No, I think he passed some years
Yeah,
ago.
Chesapeake Bay. And
Chesapeake
many
Bay.
of his
Many
books.
of yeah. I read a lot of his books when I was like in high
Yeah.
school. But I can't remember the titles
No,
now.
the
But like
great-
I was really profoundly influenced and affected by those books. And those really big
Big
voluminous books.
And many of them made into movies, I think.
Yeah.
So, Michael, this has been such a fun chat. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Stay tuned for my full chat with Michael about Leave My Bones in Saskatoon, the best title of a book that I read last year, and wonderful cover. And yeah, I finished some books. I'm going to start some books, but I don't have time to tell you about any of that stuff for all the reasons that I listed at the beginning of this video. Happy reading, everybody, and I'll be back to my usual long-winded, rambling self next week. Thanks for watching.